Welcome to Autism Parenting Summit, brought to you by our sponsors. Platinum sponsors. Cortica. Cortica's whole child care model helps children with autism and other neurodevelopmental differences to thrive. We support families with medical, behavioral, and developmental therapies, along with counseling services, under one roof. North Florida Stem Cells. North Florida Stem Cells, led by Dr. Eric Weiss, is dedicated to providing innovative stem cell therapy for children with autism, helping families explore new possibilities for improved quality of life. ICDL, the International Council on Development and Learning, is the home of DIR and DIR Floor Time, empowering parents to successfully help their children develop and learn with joyful engagement and love. Burble Creativity. Burble has developed a unique storytelling technology that merges lights, sound, and story in a way that empowers readers to actively imagine and personalize the details of the narrative. Gold sponsors. Algonaut. Algonaut produces natural dietary supplements designed to support cognitive function and reduce inflammation. Their products contain pure flavonoids and olive oil for enhanced absorption. These supplements aim to help individuals, including those with autism, by reducing brain inflammation and therefore promoting brain health and clarity. Gut-Brain Axis Therapeutics Incorporated. Gut-Brain Axis Therapeutics is developing microbiota transplant therapy for treating gastrointestinal symptoms and autism symptoms. LifeWorks for Autism. LifeWorks for Autism is a supportive living and learning community for autistic young adults as they transition to independent living and employment. Visit Myrtle Beach. Myrtle Beach is an inclusive, sensory-friendly destination where families of all abilities can feel at home. Silver sponsors. Autism Parenting Magazine. Join a thriving community of families and unlock the potential of your child. Autism Learning Network. Join a community that understands. Unlock a wealth of resources. Access expert advice, practical tools, and shared wisdom.
Hello and welcome to both of you. Very lucky to have two experts with us for this presentation. Kathleen Moe Taylor and Marcy Laurel joining us from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I hope you're both well. Kathleen, we'd like to start with you and just to say hello and get to know you a little bit.
Yes, obviously, my name is Kathleen Moe Taylor. I go by Moe, and I'm an occupational therapist, and I have 40 plus years of experience. And I have had the pleasure of working and learning with people with autism for a very long time. And I have done a lot of different settings in which I've worked in swimming pools, out in nature, in schools and workplaces and homes, from with children and families from 2 years old all the way to like 62 years old. I right now am having the pleasure to kind of scale back and consult a little bit more with early on OTs coming into the field. And I'm getting to do a lot of kind of consultation. And I'm also getting to teach a class on autism with teenagers and young adults with autism. And that's been an incredible learning. So thank you.
Amazing. And just before we get to the description of your session this evening, we also have, of course, Marcy joining us also from Albuquerque. And Marcy, you're a speech and language pathologist. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you so much, Laura. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, I've also been a speech language pathologist for a very long time, doing lots of different things, working in community and public school and university settings. And my great pleasure to have done so much of that with Mo over the years. So it's especially amazing for us to get to be here together talking about our work. Currently, I work at the University of New Mexico Center for Development and Disability. I work on autism assessment teams and doing some consulting and teaching and various and sundry things, including, as Mo talked about, the opportunity to work with younger people coming into the field, which is one of my greatest pleasures at this time. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. It's interesting, the topic that you're bringing to us today, social engagement and sort of improving those the social skills and those steps to being social for autistic individuals and anyone who's sort of worked or parented or even in their family or friends circle. People with autism, they often struggle with those social skills, but what you're going to show us today, if I am understanding correctly, are ways to sort of teach those skills as you would teach any other skill in life. As someone who maybe didn't know how to fix a car or how to bake a cake, there are skills that can be learned. We don't naturally know all of these things. So is there anything else you could give us as a sort of just a brief glimpse into what we're in store for today?
Well, I think that, like you said, we're all learning skills. In our whole life, we're learning new skills, right? And on the social arena, we're all still learning. And so it's not about changing people or telling people they're doing things right or wrong. It's more about providing skills, though, so that people have a choice to use that skill or not use that skill. Just like you made reference to, do I want to fix a car or do I not want to fix a car?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Marcy, anything you'd like to add before I turn the presentation over?
I think that I so appreciate you framing it that way, Laura, right from the beginning, because it's so much what we are hoping and wanting to put across. And it's unlikely I'll ever want to bake a cake, as Mo would know, but and that makes it such a perfect example, is just how much our hope is to provide support that everyone would have all of the opportunities that they want to have. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our thoughts in that way.
Oh, it's our absolute pleasure. So in just a moment, I'll turn over the presentation to the both of you to find out what you have, and from both your combined 80 plus years of experience. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot. The people subscribing to the sessions, I'm sure are going to really benefit and enjoy your presentation. So without any further delay, Mo and Marcy, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you. You have a slideshow ready to go. I'm going to disappear and I'll see you back at the end of your presentation for a few follow-up questions and then just any final thoughts that you'd like to share. So thank you very much, and we'll see you at the end of the show.
Thank you,
Thank
Laura.
you.
So hello, here we are again, and I just want to say I am so excited to speak to parents, the experts on their children, and to be doing this presentation with Marcy. Thank you, Mars.
Thank you. And let's go ahead with our slides. We're going to start off with, so you can go ahead and flip that slide. Thank you so much, Mo. There we go. We'll start off very briefly with disclosures. Again, I'm Marcy Laurel, and I am an employee at the University of New Mexico, where a lot of this content was initially developed. We also have published this work in the book called Social Engagement and the Steps to Being Social with the company Future Horizons. I'm also the co-author of Our Heart's Desire for Parents Navigating the Journey of Sensory Processing Challenges. And that is a book near and dear to my heart about my own family's experience, and it is a reference for the model presented today. Mo is part-time faculty, as Laura and she spoke of earlier, at the University of New Mexico Occupational Therapy Department, where this content is taught currently. And Mo is also the owner of her private therapy business, TheraPlay, where this content has been developed and disseminated, and more than that, just held with so much love and care as the model continues to change every day. And then we do not have any relevant non-financial relationships to disclose. And so here is our model, so the steps to being social. This is the model we're here to talk about today as a visual framework, as you can see, to guide assessment and intervention in the area of social skill development. And as Mo just said, and we spoke about a little bit earlier, we're so excited to talk to you about all of this today, This model represents a culmination of decades of learning from so many children and their families over a long period of time, and a very deep, and some people might say obsessive, interest in what it means to be social. But that said, we are, of course, highly aware of how ideas are changing about autism and appropriate interventions and neurodiversity and whose voices need to be included in all of this conversation. So we want to say that we strive to share today what we've learned with respect, with curiosity, certainly with humility, and in a way that we hope will be useful to all of you who are here participating as we all strive to help improve the quality of life for all people. And so in that spirit, our objectives for this hour are that you would be able to define the 4 components of engagement, be familiar with the skill sets of the steps to being social, identify where on the model, once we kind of put out this whole model, someone you're here to think about is ready to learn. So that's where we're going to be going over our hour together today. And so we want to start here. We think about person first versus identity first language. And I think I've given a lot of thought to this over the last years, as many of us have, and how the language that we use to describe ourselves and describe other people really has a big impact. So the words we use has the potential to shape how we think about other people, how others think about us, how we think about one another. Words really matter, especially within the scope of the work that we're here to talk about today. So it's my best understanding is there's no single correct vocabulary surrounding autism, but there's kind of 2 common philosophies that are most prevalent right now. So Mo, if you can pop that up for us. We have person first language. And this stems from the idea that all people are people first and foremost, regardless of their abilities or disability or other aspects of their identity. So common phrases would be a person with autism or a person who has autism. And people like Mo and I, who are older than some, this is the way that we learned was the most respectful way to talk about folks. And however, many self-advocates are teaching us that they prefer identity first language, which embodies the idea that autism and disability or diagnosis or any of those things are integral to a person's very identity, that we can't separate that one from the other, the disability from the self, or the description of a different way of being from the self. And so common phrases that might align here would be an autistic person, right? A person as opposed to a person with autism. So we will plan to use both in the spirit of including everyone and everyone's thoughts on this topic. Okay, and so neurodiversity, what is this? This is a concept. Neurological, what was once called disorders, are actually a natural part of life, and that neurological differences be valued, whether it's autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, language challenges, all of the things that you see listed under this umbrella, all of these labels that we've used for such a long time, natural part of humankind. And also a movement that started strongly in the 1990s as an autistic civil rights movement to revise society's conceptualization of what is normal. So this is powerful and important stuff that we're all thinking about more and more. And so, again, we strive to foster quality of life, including that the participation of folks in their own communities and their own decisions about where they want to be going in their lives, and also for people to be able to seek the level of independence that they might want. And what are the steps to help get a person to the spaces where they want to go? And then just to note that, you know, for a long time, we used a puzzle piece to represent autism, and you see here what we have is an infinity symbol, and the idea being that a puzzle piece made some people think about something that was missing. There's a missing piece in the puzzle, whereas an infinity is complete as it is, and that's the framework that we want to be using as we talk to you today. So given all of that, in this context, why do we feel like this continues to be so important? Mo and I tend to like to repeat words like so, and sometimes our editors aren't very happy with that, but we still like it, so that's how we are. But the reason so important from our perspective is one, that social skills are the context for so much learning, not just about being friendly with people or making friends or having relationships, but just we are among people when we are learning, whether that's in schools or out in the community or everywhere we are, we're learning things among people. And we also know from the research that adult outcomes, where people are able to go in their adult life, is so impacted by the ability to be able to interact socially and be flexible socially in a variety of settings. So once again, as I think Laura said right at the start, and most certainly said, we're looking at choices. So people have choices for their future. So important for those adult outcomes. And then finally, very near and dear to Mo and my hearts, both as just people, as mothers, as professionals, is that we see the desire to belong as universal, as just a pervasive part of the culture of being human. And so we want to be sure that we're respecting this and finding pathways to belonging that fit for any individual that we are having the good fortune to support. And so we say social skills count. Michelle Garcia Winner, who many of you might be familiar with, who's done a lot of writing in the area of teaching social skills, said long ago in 2005, which Mo, that's way longer ago than it seems like it should be. But having good social skills, she said 20 years ago, simply means people share their space with others effectively. So we keep this here because we want to make that point that social skills are not just for social situations like making friends, but they're skills that we need to function in everyday life. Everywhere we are, how do we learn to regulate as part of a group? And so we get to the idea and we ask ourselves, where did we learn social skills, right? So some of us might have learned them intuitively. If we came into the world with a brain that was pretty good at learning this intuitively, then we would learn it by observation. In other words, we're little, we're looking around, we're noticing the skills of other people. Also, by noticing other people's reactions to us. This is a big way that as little people, we learn social skills. We do something, then what happens? We note what happens after we use a certain behavior, right? So that's the way that we learn it intuitively. But sometimes we think about teaching these skills cognitively. So in other words, for someone who isn't picking up all the skills intuitively, then how are we going to cognitively teach these skills? And that's where the steps come in, breaking it down to steps that we can teach to a person in a way that we can understand. As again, as we will just keep saying over and over, when we have more skills, we have more choices. And so this is what the rest of our presentation is really about. Well, when we have an agreement with a family or an individual that person wants to learn these skills, okay, how are we going to go about teaching them in a way that's productive? So learning social skills. Oops. Yeah, we go back one, I think, Mo.
Sorry.
No worries. So learning social skills, concept being we can teach social skills directly and explicitly in a variety of settings. And that some learners have found that structured learning and practicing specific social skills can really help. So sometimes Mo and I will use the analogy of teaching reading. A lot of kids are just going to pick up reading, right? If they're around literacy, they're going to pick up reading. But we have some group of kiddos who are not just going to learn reading by exposure, to literacy. And so this is something I think about in my own world, where I have a son who had very substantial dyslexia that got in the way of his education in the early years of his life. And I think some of you will really relate to this, because people would sometimes ask me, well, did you read to him? So in their thinking, they were like, well, if you read to him, then he would be exposed to literacy. And then, of course, he would learn to read, right? But in the case of my son, sometimes I took a little offense to that question, though it's never helpful to take offense, I know. Yes, I did read to him, but the way his brain came into the world, or the neurodiversity that is described by the term dyslexia, did not allow him to pick up those skills just by being exposed to them. And so this is, again, that concept that we can teach these skills when they're not learned intuitively. So some of the basics of our model. We strongly emphasize that being regulated can support being social. Having self-regulation skills, especially among other people. So even on this webinar that you're watching, we wish we were here with you in person right now, but this webinar that you're watching, you can think about what are you doing to be regulated, to choose how much you want to attend. And that's a real key, right? Because some of you might just be here, you kind of want to let the words wash over you, you want to get a general idea of what this model is. That's cool. So you choose how you're going to keep yourself in a good space to get what you want. Maybe someone else is here who really wants to start using this model tomorrow, right? And then you're going to have to think about how much focus and attention you need, and then how are you going to be regulated sitting in a chair looking at a computer for the hour in order to learn what you want to learn. So being regulated can support being social. Engagement to us is the foundation of being social. And Mo will talk about this in just a few minutes at much more length. But it's the concept that we have to be engaged to understand the way of being with other people, of sharing space with other people and being together before we can think about some of the other skills that we more traditionally associate with social skill development. We know that these skills can be broken down into very small and measurable and easy to describe steps, very specific steps. And that this is important because you may have looked at educational planning for your child, or those of you who are professionals may have, struggled to write the kinds of goals that are going to make sense around teaching social skills. And sometimes we'll see a goal like improve social skills with 80% accuracy. Well, when we realize, we're not even sure what that means, and then how would we measure 80% accuracy? So again, you'll see that we're trying to think about breaking these down into much smaller and specific steps. And then Mo already said this in her introduction, but we talk about it all the time, that social growth is a lifetime of learning. And let me tell you, we for sure and for certain are people that are very much still learning. And then finally, a concept here that all communication is social. So not that long ago, we used to break down, like in assessment and intervention, okay, we're looking at communication skills, we're looking at social skills. And we've come to a better understanding that all communication is social. So if you think of communication as sending messages to someone and receiving messages from someone, it has to be social or it's not actually communication. And that becomes really important in the work that we do. So in our focus, we focus on an individual's ability to get their important messages across. For example, to express what they want, to express what they do not want, to initiate interaction with another person if they want to, right? And so that could be with words, with pictures, with objects, with actions. But if it's communication, it's social. And that's kind of the focus of everything we're going to talk about for the rest of our time. So now let's get into talking about engagement, which I have to admit is my personal favorite topic, which is about to be presented by my personal favorite person, Mo Taylor, who has helped me so much to understand this foundation of being social. So thank you, Mo.
Thank you, Marcy. And we ask ourselves, so what's it mean to be engaged? That's a word that we've heard a lot more about, engage, 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 but what actually does it mean? And what we know is that no matter the age, no matter the level of ability or the diagnosis that may or may not be laid onto somebody, the key component of social skills is engagement. So we asked ourselves many years ago with a group of people, what does it look like? Because if we're trying to teach this, we need to know, what's it look like? What's it feel like? How can we break it down like a task analysis? And then we asked ourselves, why is it so important? And when we think about it, we believe that there's 4 components to engagement. We have self-regulation, we have shared space, we have shared focus, and we have shared engagement. It's kind of like a pie, right? And we've got 4 pieces to the pie. And what we really know is that the early moments of engagement are the foundation of a lifetime of social living, right? Being with people and interacting with people. And so let's begin with self-regulation. Marcy talked about that a little bit earlier. How do we get regulated? We need to be regulated, and that's being in an emotional and physical state to learn and respond positively in an interaction. When we think about regulation, our model, we use the words calm plus alert equals ready. Ready for what? Ready to socially interact, ready to be next to a person, ready to hang up my backpack on the little hook in preschool. It's about being with others. And what we know is that a large percent, I think I read a study, 96% of individuals on the autism spectrum have a difference in how they understand sensory input coming in. So we want to really take that into our little brains to think, well, if we want to be regulated, what does that mean? We know the sensory information comes in through our central nervous system. It's coming in through all these different channels. We process that information and then we react or we respond, right? That information is coming in through our sense of touch. It's coming in through our auditory channel, which can be very challenging for people that I have gotten to spend 40 years of my life with. We have visual channel coming in through our eyes. What I've noticed is a lot of people on the spectrum, their visual channel is really clear. That's a great way to get information in. We can also have information coming in through vestibular, our sense of movement, or our smell, our taste, or our proprioceptive input, which is kind of our position in space, knowing where our body stops and then the world begins. So I wonder what sensory input helps you stay regulated for a social interaction. Like now, I'm a mover and shaker. I'm sitting right now, but I wish I wasn't. I like the proprioception of standing, although I have one of these chairs that goes up and down. I like the proprioception of standing. I like to move. That helps me regulate. And remember, what does regulation mean? It means I'm calm, but I'm alert and I'm ready. I can bring my best self to the table when I'm regulated. Mars, I wonder what helps you regulate?
You know, I gave a lot of thought to this as we were preparing to do this presentation, but then something just happened that I haven't even gotten to tell you about. So I'm in the shower at the gym and I get out, and some women that I often see there say, "Oh, we always love to hear you humming and singing. You're so cheerful." Well, first of all, I'm actually not that cheerful, but I realize that, oh my gosh, I've been humming and singing publicly in the shower. And so, Mo, what it made me think about is I just need so much auditory input all the time. If I'm writing reports, if I'm doing anything, I've got to have sound going. And so here I am in the shower creating my own sound. And so I told myself, oh, this is so embarrassing. I will not do this again. But here's what happened. The next time I was in the shower, it was harder than I thought it would be to stop because it's calming and organizing for me. And it took incredible cognitive challenge to keep myself from humming. And I'm not thinking I was 100% accurate. So that's just something that came up recently for me. I need that input. You'll have to
Yes,
tell me later what to
and
do.
what's interesting for us as adults, as educators, as parents, trying to work with maybe somebody who might need a little support in regulating themselves, is we need to know what regulates us. And so when we regulate ourselves, we can be better detectives to help the people who we love and work with, help them to regulate themselves. And Marcy and I were so fortunate to have a meal with Carol Gray, who we love and know and value her work so much. And she made a statement I'll never forget. And she said, well, Mo, you know, when you're calmer, you're smarter. And I thought to myself, wow, that's so important for us to remember. When you're calmer, you're smarter. When you're smarter, that means you have more access to the skills that you do have inside. So it's only when we're self-regulated can we begin to then share the space and pursue a positive interaction. Which brings us to the next piece of the pie, and that's shared space, being in proximity. And when we look at this little picture of this dad and this little boy, really close proximity, right? Because sometimes we need to recognize what proximity, what space works for another person. And I know in the past 40 years, I've had to get uncomfortably close to people, to get into their world, to get into their space so that I can be in this social dance with them. And what we think about when we share space is what would support a person. We need to ask ourselves, what setting are they calm and alert in, right? What do they prefer? What is the proximity that some people prefer? In our American culture, many people will say it's an arm's distance away. That's what I'm teaching and talking with some of my teenagers and young adults with, is because you're bigger than I am now. And when you get right here close to me, I have a fear response. And so I'd like it maybe if we have more space between us. But other cultures are different. I've gotten to do some work in Russia and South Africa, and it's more like an elbow. It's more like people are right close to you, and I'm kind of leaning back, kind of wondering, wow, do I like this shared space, or is this not making me feel comfortable? Then we say, how do we use those visual pieces to divine space? Because we know that visual channel is a really precise, accurate channel for many autistics that I've gotten to be with. And then we ask ourselves, do we limit the materials? Do we organize the materials in some way? And when we do that, we want to create an environment that is more comfortable. Because we know when we're more comfortable, we're more at ease and we're more ready to be with someone. And then within that shared space, we can actually begin to attend to each other, or actually attend to something, which brings us to shared focus. Both people paying attention to the same thing. And I wonder what's interesting to you. I wonder what's interesting to some of the individuals that I get to be with who seem to be very impacted by their autism. It's not the same thing that is interesting to me. So I have to go out of my way to find that. We know the science tells us something here. Science has worked and taken a lot of information on autistic brains and neurotypical brains. And when an autistic's brain sees an object that's important to them, boy, the dopamine is going. And when a neurotypical brain sees a human face, boy, the dopamine is going. So we have to ask ourselves, if it is an object that this autistic is very interested in, then I need to pair myself with that object. I need to become one with that object because then I will become important to that person. So I have a little story. I get to work with a young woman who is now 30, but I got to see her starting when she was about 6 and then on and off through her years. She was nonverbal, very impacted by her autism, and really just what some people would say, like to be in her own little world. And but what she loved was blue markers. She liked the smell of blue markers. She loved blue markers. And so when I was trying to get her to get engaged with me, First, we would get regulated, right? We would do the movement, we would do the sensory input she needed to be regulated. Then we'd share the space, which was for Mandy, was to get very, very close together. Then we would share the focus. And for her, the focus was blue markers because I knew that was important to her. So I started pairing that with me so I would become important. So how do we support shared focus? We find out what are people interested in? How do they bring our attention to the thing that's important to them? And how do we bring their attention to something we think is important? And how long can that shared focus kind of stay? I've gotten to work with, again, so many amazing people. I can tell you, Emiliano, he loved hangers, all different kinds of hangers. And Nemesio, he loved pipe cleaners, and he would bend them into different forms. And Miranda, she loved to talk about terminal diseases. So I personally had to brush up on my terminal disease knowledge to just keep up with her in a conversation. But first, sometimes if we can use that interest, and Temple Grandin talks about this in so many ways, use those special interests. It's almost like a light switches on and we're in. We get to be in the engagement, and it's a gift to be in engagement with another person. So Marcy, I wonder about you. Have you heard any different special interests that really tapped into you?
You know, I'm thinking about a girl that I met not long ago who's middle school age, excuse me, and she was a little hard to connect with, and the person that was working with her trying to do some testing was a trainee, so a younger learner in her own field. And she was really struggling on this connection. And then now I'm going to laugh at myself, but the girl started humming a tune, as I guess I do in the shower. And the young psychologist was like, okay, now I have an in. And she said, oh, is that the theme from Star Wars? She thought she really had it. And the little girl looked kind of disdainful and she said, it's Beethoven's Fifth. Well, it turned out that the way in for this little friend who had autism was classical music. And we certainly would have to brush up, or I would, on my knowledge in that area that I don't have a lot of knowledge for. But again, another good example, you know, of an autistic person with a lot of words and a lot of verbal skills, but when it came to engagement, still having to think about, I love the way you just said that, the in that gave us the privilege of connecting to her.
And it is a privilege. It is a privilege to connect with people, but don't ever think people don't want to connect. Because just because Alex V is over in the corner with his Starbucks straw and he's twirling it like this through his fingers, don't think he doesn't want to connect. Don't think he doesn't want to engage. He doesn't know how. And so that's where we come in. We can gather the knowledge around to figure out, well, how can we make this happen? And now that we're on the same topic, whether it's the Starbucks straw or the blue marker or Beethoven's, then we can begin to have fun together, right? And we share an enjoyment. We find pleasure in the same moment together. And we need to think about this because it might not last like a really long time, right? It might just be a moment. It might just be a glance. And it's less about our head and more about our heart because you feel this happen. And it's really hard to teach people this, but you can identify it and say, yes, that's that enjoyment. And when I think about enjoyment for some of the people that I've got to be with and work with and live with, I say to myself, wow, what helps them? What actually is enjoyment because it looks different, right? It might have a different nonverbal cue. I remember Amaya, she used to have this glance to the left, up and to the left. And that meant she was liking what we were doing. And then I got to be with Connor and he had a big belly laugh and it was very clear to me that he was in enjoyment with whatever we were doing. And then I know Jerome, who I get to be with now, he does a lot of hand flapping for me. What that means, he's excited. It means he's having enjoyment. And so we need to kind of think about that piece of what does enjoyment look like. And it is really, it is the synergy of shared space, shared focus, and shared enjoyment in the context of that calm plus alert equals ready that defines those very special moments of engagement. And when you think about our model, we have 4 different skill sets of our model. And the skill set number 1 is foundation. It's this pie, it's this base, it's this foundation at the bottom of our steps. And we must first be engaged to then be able to begin to walk up to more specific steps that we're trying to teach. So let me see here. So when we think about, well, how do you teach this, Mo? That's great. You're telling us get our kids engaged. That's what the world is saying. Get engaged, not with the device, but with another person, right? Some strategies that I've used in my practice and have just got to use last week with Asia here in the photo was you shrink the space. You make the space smaller so that you're right there with that person and you're big. You're having those cues that are big for them, and you limit the materials and you use motivating items. So this is a pool group that I get to run, and we have 4 7-year-olds in that group. One of those 7-year-olds is Asia. She's here in the blue cap in the top picture. She is very impacted with her autism. She has a few words, but really is working and trying to get engaged with people in order to move up the different social steps. And so in this pool setting, Asia would be off by herself if she did not have any instruction. But what do? We try to set up the environment. Again, we're not trying to make these skills happen because as humans, we actually have some of these skills, but we are providing all the opportunities and all the setup for us to use the skills that we have. So Asia loves snakes. So I got, of course, snakes that sink to the bottom of the pool. And the bottom picture shows you we move to the corner of the pool. We have the kids in the corner, we have floating devices, we have adults with us around us, and we drop the sinking snakes. Lily, who's a peer, goes down, she grabs the snake, she brings it up, and this snake is right here by her face. And then Asia grabs it from her and puts it in a container. It was a moment of beautiful engagement. And we try to increase the duration and the frequency of those engageable moments to happen. And we teach others. Wow, I got to teach little 7-year-olds. That's what we're looking for. We want you to hold that spot with Asia because that's what she's learning today. You might be learning the butterfly, but she's learning this, and it's just as important. So I want to say that engagement, again, is the foundation of being social. And now that we have a glimpse or an understanding of what we call engagement, Marcy will begin to move us through the steps.
Thanks, Mo. So yeah, we're learning it's a process, right? And you can't start at the top, and that we're every one of us working daily toward this connection that we're all seeking. Oops. So go ahead, Mo. We'll just go right on to the next one. And so we like to think about, or we often think about this issue of perspective taking. Are we available and are people that we know available to understand the perspectives of other people? And there's some controversy around this work, but bottom line, we're wondering if people can understand that other people have different thoughts than they do, but sometimes we have to stop and say, oh, are we taking the perspective also of our learners with autism? And so we just put this little graphic together. I say we, but really if it's a graphic, just know that Mo did it, not me. Words, I'm only words. But anyway, so we're looking at the steps that we won't get into in great detail today, but starting with proximity, being in the same space for longer periods of time. And we're thinking that the thinking process is, oh, wow, you're here too. Moving into parallel. Oh, wait, you're doing something like I'm doing. I'm noticing that we're doing the same thing. Joint attention. Oh, we're both paying attention to the same thing at the same time. Even I could bring your attention to it. You could bring my attention to it. We are looking at this, both of us. Reciprocal exchange with the back and forth. Oh, it's me then you, me then you. Give and take of communication. I got it. I got the message. Coming right back to you. Perspective taking. Hey, wait, that's not what I was thinking, right? Just starting to get that idea that people have different thoughts and ideas. Reading the social scene is just that looking all around saying there is a lot going on here. Let me think about how I might want to be involved. Group cooperation. Okay, a little of my idea and a little of yours. I might have to start being kind of flexible if I want to be engaged in the group. And then that ever present desire of friendship, so often where we start in terms of what somebody is asking about. I'm interested in you. What can we do together? What do we have in common? What's not in common? How am I going to deal with that? And then the growing connections. We're in it for the long haul. How are we going to sustain these relationships over time and space? So that's just a snapshot of our steps. So the second skill set, Mo talked about the foundation being the first skill set, or sometimes we call it, as Mo did briefly, the pie of engagement. This is the lower four, and the lower four is learning to be together with a social partner and beginning to participate in some back and forth interaction. So as I just alluded to, getting into the same space, noticing parallel actions, being able to attend to the same thing at the same time, to bring someone else's attention to something of interest, to follow someone else's interest, and then that back and forth or reciprocal exchange. And so strategies, right? So we use those visual supports. Mo already talked about that quite a bit. It might be something that shows the space that we're even going to hang out in, so I know where social is happening. Might be the use of schedules that tells us where we're going to go or what we're going to be doing when we get there. Could be a visual timer, because sometimes not just people who we're working with in therapy, but all of us want to know, oh my gosh, how long are we going to have to be social before we can retreat back to our own spaces? So visual supports. Sometimes we directly teach a specific skill that we know is going to help with this back and forth social interaction. And then we apply it. Always, we know how we're going to apply it to an actual natural social interaction. So for example, there might be a goal of imitating gross motor actions, clapping, pat your head, do this, do that, but not just for the sake of doing it. Then we're going to go maybe into a little circle time activity where we're using that skill of imitation, a really important skill in learning social communication, as part of a social interaction. We want to incorporate back and forth interactions with objects at all levels. I just met a little guy yesterday who had certain objects that he just loved so dearly. He was such an endearing little person. And we talked about just changing up a little bit the interactions, where instead of taking those favorite things off the floor out of the drawer, he could take it from a person, right? He could take it from a person. He could give it back to that person when he was done with it. This is what we mean by the small steps, the important steps, to teach that skill so it could be incorporated into more spontaneous back and forth social interaction in the future. That ability to direct attention to people and actions in close proximity. So if I'm going to look at Mo right now and say, oh my gosh, look at that, right? And I'm going to teach her that when you look, when I do it with my whole body and heart and try to get you to see what I see, it's going to be something really good because I know this is hard for you. And then I'm going to follow her eyes and actions to make sure that I'm attending to what's important to her. So just some strategies that we use to get into the same space together, to begin to notice the other person, to begin to share focus, and then start that back and forth social interaction. That is the lower 4. And Mo, I know you were talking to me just recently about a little person that we both know and how her mom came up with such a great strategy for these for the lower 4. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is Yaz, and she's 5 years old, and she actually has some verbal communication, a lot of echo communication or words that she uses, but she is in a kindergarten, small kindergarten classroom right now, and she is using a visual support of a visual schedule. That picture tells her where to go and it tells her in what order she's going to go in. And that really decreases her anxiety. So she has more access to her social skills, which are really functioning right at this lower place, this lower 4. She's just beginning to do that joint attention and that gives something to somebody and gets something for somebody else. Her mom came up with this brilliant idea of Yazi loves mail. So she gets mail, she loves postcards. And so now at the end of the school day, her mom comes to get her a little bit early and she brings 2 postcards. Yazi makes a choice of picking a postcard. And then another goal of Yazi's mom is to have her write her name. So she writes her name on that postcard. And then she goes and gives that to a peer. She's structured up this idea of reciprocity, right? Reciprocal exchange. But let's practice it a little bit more because it doesn't come maybe so naturally. And we've got to kind of structure all the pieces, but let's use something that's important to Yaz. The other kids have been primed and they are super excited, hoping they're going to get the postcard, right, of the day. And it's been really, really a positive, again, experience because this family took time to know where is my child socially? Yes, I want to move all the way up to friendship, but what are the little steps that I can do in practice to move all the way up the steps?
And then we come to the third skill set, the middle 4. You'll see this is a big one. There's a lot in it. You could spend a lot of time considering these skills. This is learning to use that directed back and forth communication, as we talked about earlier, the sending and receiving of messages, to start to understand that others have different ideas, that perspective taking, and that social activity is happening everywhere. So this is the beginning of starting to do some of the kinds of things we might have thought we wanted to work on earlier, but now we've set the foundation. And in case you're wondering, there's lots of little sub-steps under all of these pillars. So if you're really interested, then we can have a great conversation. But for the purpose of our hour together, we want you to be able to kind of see the flow. See the flow. Okay. So strategies, again, the visual supports that are allowing individuals to understand and see with their eyes what the expectations are, where the social interaction is going to happen, how long is it going to take place, and so on. Social skills groups are great at this level of learning where you have some folks together that are learning some certain and specific skills so that you can have structured teaching and practice. That supported practice is so important. So somebody can be there giving those cues and those ideas for how to keep the interaction going. Met a little guy this week again who just was the best initiator you could ever hope to meet. Hey and hi and showing interest and showing things he was interested in. And that's all. It didn't go on from there. So great, we can get him started. He's got those foundational skills, but now how are we going to teach him to sustain that interaction and grow that interaction? And a social skills group is a great place to do it. Social narratives, many of you I know are familiar with the social stories and comics and social scripts that allow the learner to understand some more specific information about how to engage in a certain social interaction. video modeling is so awesome and always has been, but now it's so much easier because many of us are just carrying around our little computers in our pockets. We can make videos. They don't have to be beautiful and perfect, but we can make videos that help an individual understand how they might be able to interact in a situation that they desire. And then peer support, as Mo just talked about at the earlier skill set, bringing in those peers. And where this model can be so helpful is we can really let the peers know exactly what it is we're asking them to help in the teaching and learning. So an example of this was a guy that Mo and I both knew who was very interested in playing a tetherball game out on their playground area in a middle school. But it was so hard. Like, think what you have to figure out when you stop to break it down. Like, how do you get into the game and what are the rules of the game and how do you deal with winning and losing and all of that, right? And so we did do just this. We had peer support to say, okay, Joe wants to learn about playing tetherball. We have all these steps that we've identified for what it takes to do that successfully. And then we go out and make a video. And who doesn't want to be the star of a video? All those kids wanted to do it, right? And then we could sit and watch it together and think about it and watch it again. And it was so supportive for that particular little guy. Really not a little guy, a big guy like Mo. Some of these kids we've known since they were little and suddenly they're eighth graders. But what a great way for him to learn these strategies for the middle four.
So we're moving up. We're moving up to the last and final, the fourth skill set. So we did that engagement. Remember that foundation of engagement. Then we did that lower four, just really where students and learners are beginning to get, oh, people are in my proximity and I'm doing a little bit of give and take, my turn, your turn, just a little bit. Then the middle four, wow, I'm really doing and sending a message back and forth. I'm starting to think about that you have different thoughts and I'm beginning to read the social scene. And now we're in our final four steps. Learning to interact successfully as part of a group, creating friendship, which is what every, and me included, mom wants for their child, and to move towards lasting, meaningful relationships. When you think about the final four, the upper four, the reading the social scene again is about looking up, looking at what there is to do, and then how to step in to what's happening, right? How do you join an interaction? And really knowing how to kind of cope with your own stress in a social situation. When we think about the next pillar, group cooperation, there's many different sub-steps or sub-skills underneath that, but a couple of them are just staying with the group. I know I get to work with a teenage and young adult group now, and some of them just needed to have some instruction of you got to be in the group if you want people to hear what you have to say. And how do I repair a social mistake? And maybe how do I adjust my behavior so that other people have different thoughts about me? And then we move on to friendship, the pillar, like Marcy said earlier, that everybody wants to be working on, and everybody is working on. When we start with Asia, who's just trying to get engaged, and we move to Yazi, who's really working hard, they are all working on friendship because all these skills build upon one and then the other. And when we're thinking about friendship, our little sub skills might be, well, do you know what you have in common? And is it okay if you don't have something in common? And can you make a plan to get together? And then we move to growing connections, which is really just trying to understand. And I have had the gift of working with some young adults now who really, how do you figure out different relationships? And boy, is it challenging these days, right? How many times do you text somebody to see if they want to go out? How many times does no mean no? That whole piece. Yes, it's so challenging. And how do you sustain and maintain a relationship over time and distance? And how do we keep ourselves safe? And it is really an important group of skills that we are teaching and learning ongoing, and we're all learning this. It's not just autistics. We're all trying to figure it out. But how do we help people who might need a little bit different method of learning it in a very concrete manner? And so we look at strategies. We ask our people, how do we encourage them to have their own goals, their own social goals? When I run a social group now, with actually starting at like even my young groups, my elementary groups, they all determine a social goal of what do they want to learn. And then we encourage them to have social opportunities. Because what I know is that I have people that I've gotten to be with who they really want friends. They really want friends, but they do not leave their couch. And so they cannot make friends unless they're online friends. And then they tell me those are their pretend friends. And so how do we make opportunities to go practice those skills? Just like if I want to hit a home run, I'm just not going to walk onto the baseball field and hit the home run. I have to practice my skills. I have to practice them little at a time. I have to get my body set. I have to get the bat up. I have to watch the ball. Exactly like social. I want that end friendship, but I might need to practice some of these skills building all the way up. And we also need to be aware and think about other people's actions and feelings. And again, bring those visuals in to track once more. I can tell you that I get to work with this group right here in the photo. These are some 9 different young adults who are working with me to help me teach a university class on autism. They have decided what their topic is going to be. They've decided how they want to teach that. They've decided how long they want to teach. And they've also decided what method they want to use. And what's so interesting is all the social pieces, and they're like, Mo, when we come in, can we have a schedule of what's going to happen today? And can you make a calendar of when we're actually going to meet those students and what our day is? And they're asking for visual supports. They're also asking for executive functioning aids. How do you tell me if this is my outcome over here as a presentation? What are all the steps that go up to meet that? So we're using a lot of visuals. And this is bringing us kind of to the end of our model. As you can see here, we have the picture that's in our book of the model where we have the base, the foundation, and then we have our lower 4 moving up and our middle 4 and then our upper 4. And this is just a snapshot. Not only do we have skill sets that we just talked about, but we have sub-steps. And those are these little tiny boxes on each pillar that Marcy made reference to. And those are measurable, pivotal objectives that you could teach and practice with individuals if they made sense to that particular setting and that in particular individual. And see, wow, if we can get better at this, then we could jump to the next one. I think that what we need to know again is that social skills are changing over the lifetime, and that this is not just static, where we walk up the skill sets and we get really good. You know it. We've been in friendships that have fallen apart, right? We've all had that experience. And we kind of lose our skills, right? We drop down and we need to circle around the base again to come back up. So as Marcy told me, we need to have this be more of an escalator than a steps. And I'm like, I don't know how to draw an escalator, but moving parts. That's what social is. It's a dance. It's about moving back and forth with people who we know, with people who we love, with people who we don't know. How do we do that in this world. And we're wondering if you can just think about someone who you work with or live with or love and where their skills might be on this model. Are they working on just getting their body regulated? Calm plus alert equals ready. Are they working about just getting engaged with people, just noticing someone is there and sharing that enjoyment of something together for a moment? Or are they kind of in this red area of the lower four where they're just beginning to do an exchange with someone, maybe doing more taking than giving, right? Or are they in the blue, the middle four, where they're really starting to think that, wow, he has different thoughts than I have, and beginning those conversation skills back and forth? Or are they up here in that group cooperation, just trying to be part of a group, be a member, belong, like Marcy said earlier? It is a human need, desire to belong. And so don't think that just because a person who's very impacted by their autism might be off, alone, isolated, that that's all they want to be. We need to kind of set up situations so we can make it more welcoming to have that person come into our world to share some social experiences. And what we know is that it's not about changing anybody. It's about giving people an opportunity to learn more skills so they have more choice. This is our book, Social Engagement and the Steps of Being Social. Marcy and I put it together with our knowledge and our pictures and our hearts. And we hope that it can be helpful to you. It has more about an assessment. It has more about those objectives, and it also has some activities in it that you may find helpful. These are our emails. We would love to have you contact us. We just heard that this is a huge conference. I can't wait to go. And we love to be contacting with different people. We've both been able to have the gift to teach internationally, and of course, love doing that and hearing from families, because you are the reason that we wrote this book. And you bring your children to us, and we get to go with those children places. And it's really shaped me to be who I am today. So I thank you. I love being part of the autism community. And Marcy, I don't know if you have final words, and then we're going to welcome Laura back with some questions.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it more beautifully. Let's bring Laura back.
Hello again, both. Thank you so much for that very easy to follow and very clear representation of your theory and your book and what you're bringing to us today on social steps. I had lots of questions as we went through. Then you went and answered them sort of a bit when you went off and talked, and that's absolutely fine. I'll start with the fact that you mentioned that it's not a fixed progress, it's a continuum, and we go back and forth. And I think it was really important to bring that up because I think if you're working with autistic individuals, you do experience setbacks. And if you're an autistic person yourself, I'm sure, as we all do, neurodiverse or otherwise, we have those social setbacks. And I think that highlighting that was really gives a lot of hope, just gives that bit of encouragement and that acceptance of mistakes, which I think some of us are really hard on ourselves. Probably most of us are really hard on ourselves. So really appreciate that point. Yeah, and you explained that again really well. Just wanted to touch again on one of your earlier points, which was about language. You mentioned about the use of the term autistic person, individual with autism. I think that even I think in your website, you use the word awareness as well. So no labels, nothing stuck to a person, and really highlighting, as I've touched on a couple of your other points, that personalization. In your experience, any other thoughts on the importance of language when it comes to working with individuals that we're coming across, autistic or otherwise?
Well, Laura, I will just start by saying that this is where we are learning so much from an incredibly strong and vocal community of self-advocates, and that we need to be listening to what they're telling us and to really respond to people the way they want us to respond to them. And I wonder what you see with this, Laura, also, but at the same time, there are people who still really do prefer that person first language. And I encounter this with families that I work with quite frequently. And it might be in part because I'm often working with families who are just coming into this world for the first time, and they are still far more comfortable with the person first language. So I think, having patience with one another and understanding that we're all growing and trusting that each person is really intending respect, and please to let other people know if we make a mistake in that way, and to
Yeah.
allow us the opportunity to do better.
Absolutely. Mo, what may not have been has may not be included in the final piece. I did ask you at the beginning of the of meeting you how you like to be referred to, because you go by Kathleen Mo Taylor. I know how important it is to get those names right, and I wanted to know where the name comes from. So, and you very kindly and you explained that it's because where you were from, Detroit, Motown, and it made perfect sense. I feel like I got to know you a little bit better. I hope that you felt valued that I asked that, and that carries through not just with children that we work with that we're paid to be around or meant to be teaching. I think that language, I really appreciated that part of your presentation. I think it was really, really important that you touched on that so much.
I think it's so important, and I have gotten to work with an older group of teenagers and young adults now, and I actually asked them. I was with my group of 9 this week, and I said, this is going to come up. Neurodivergent, neurodiversity, autistic, Asperger's is still a word that they've heard and used. And some of them said, oh, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I'd like to be called Eric. That's what Eric said. And then Mary Jane said, doesn't matter to me. And some people said, I want to be called a person with autism because I am a person, and that's what they grew up knowing. And Alex says, I'm the autistic. Just call me autistic. And so again, it's individual because we're all the same, but we're all different, right? We all have our unique self and our unique us. And so
Absolutely.
that's why it's about respect.
Absolutely. And I think just touching on from that, addressing misconceptions, when we question sort of the language, and as you've explained sort of in your presentation in different points, sort of almost not myth busting, but taking away the fear and the questions, and really listening and looking at each individual for who they are, not taking a set of rules that we think a person followed or that we think we should do and applying those to everyone. So really about those misconceptions can sometimes get in the way of engagement. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead, Mars.
Oh, I'm not sure I'm going to exactly answer that question, but completely agree with that. 100%, Laura. And I guess I wanted to say too that, not to get too far off our topic, but we have a lot of polarization right now in our world and in our communities. And so to me, it feels really important that we presume the best of people, even if they don't in the first time speak in the way that we most wish that they would. And I'll tell this story and see if you think it fits together with what we're talking about. But on some of the testing that we do, that many people listening might be familiar with, the ADOS, the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule. There's a piece with kids, individuals that are verbal, where there's discussion and questions about relationships. And so one of the questions will be, do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? And back in the day, it used to be if you were a girl, do you have a boyfriend? If you were a boy, do you have a girlfriend, right? But now we've updated and we ask this question, do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? Well, recently we had a young man in from a very rural part of New Mexico, and the psychologist asks, do you have a boyfriend or girlfriend? And he just looked at this psychologist like, oh my gosh. He said, can you see me? He literally said that. Do you see that I'm a boy? And I thought, my gosh, he didn't get the memo that this is how we're using our words now. So I don't know if you feel like that connects, but to me, it really did. And again, that we respect the individual, any individual's point of view, and also that we think the best of people and we give people the opportunity to grow, because we don't all know always the best way to speak and to interact.
And I think that, as you touched on many times as well, just referring to the fact that these social steps are what we all go through. And it's just that, when a person is autistic, they may have a different filter where they're processing these through. But the reflecting interests makes anyone feel valued. If somebody wants to talk to me about my favorite band, I could talk for days, or about sewing, or about Canada. And it makes you feel really valued. And I think it's really important that as a professional or parent or any person in a position to help develop skills and help improve quality of life, that you do sort of hone in on those special interests and really make it known to that person you're on their side, that you see them. And then that builds that trust, I think, as well. Would you agree with that?
And I think I would. And I would also say that it's so important that for us that, yes, most people develop these social skills. And again, not, oh, I'm done with this pillar and I go to this, but it's kind of a moving kind of model like you've talked about. And sometimes we're not at our best social self. Right? When I go into a meeting and I'm really nervous and I'm not, it's going to be harder to engage with me. And what I think we need to really do is recognize, wow, these skills are hard. And we're going to try to introduce different ways of teaching these skills, but we're also going to offer opportunities to practice.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes practice is what makes things get better. And I'm so fortunate to have my teachers who happen to have autism, and they're teaching with me and they're traveling with me. And they're also, they say, I got to practice this more. I'm not very good at that one. Whoa, that was a bad one. And I'm like, hey, I didn't get that either. I'm right there with you. So.
And I think it was
too. Oh, I'm so sorry.
So go ahead, Marcy.
About what you said about people feeling seen and valued, like such an important piece. And as a therapist, I really had to learn to let go of my agenda, because sometimes we're not talking about Beethoven right now. Well, why not? Right? Why aren't we talking about that? So I so appreciate the way you formulated that. I'm going to remember that you said that aspect of having someone feel valued brings in our own flexibility. And maybe I don't know a lot about Beethoven, but how do I cultivate my interest in that? Because I want to be in relationship with this other person. So I just really like the way you said that.
And I think, I think it's just seeing the opportunities that Kathleen was explaining about the group, the older students, developing teaching, empowering them. Who better to teach us about the autistic person than autistic people themselves? Such a valuable and important voice to include. And that you that authenticity, that even people and professionals in practice who may have seen lots and lots of autistic individuals or neurodiverse or anyone, there's always a different thing to learn. And just touching on the point that you just said, Marcy, who knows, you might develop an interest yourself, and right. how lovely to be introduced to something because you've leaned into that interest in order to facilitate that trust and those social developments. Really lovely idea there.
Well, and I think too, honoring those different ways, like you started us out, Laura, at the very beginning, talking about maybe we need more skills with car mechanics or cooking or whatever it is. I think nothing brought this to the surface for Mo and I personally as writing a book together.
Absolutely.
Because We
Yeah.
have been dear friends for all of these years and have so much respect for one another, but we have really different strengths and challenges.
Mhm.
And so we had to face that as colleagues and in our friendship. And
Mm.
so it's always in process. It's
Yeah.
always in process.
And and also just touching back on again, sort of being ready to learn, engagement, as you said, is so important at the beginning of your presentation. Focusing on those the messages that are communicated through behavior, sort of what does this person need? What are they telling us? And you went into sensory processing a little bit, and it made me think. And I wrote down, link it to driving. Everybody does this all the time. So when I had a little bit of a chuckle, and I thought, yeah, when I go into a busier place, or if I don't know where I'm going, the kids have to stop talking, the radio goes off, everybody, I'm concentrating. And it's because I've reduced the sensory input. And we do this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this morning, someone was trying to give me a message through the administrator's office window, but it was freezing cold because the door was open. There was 3 or 4 parents talking, and she tried to tell me 3 or 4 times. We do this all the time, but I wonder how many people actually think about that when they're creating those opportunities, the maybe play dates for their children, they want to develop those. Are they considering that? I thought it was really interesting. So any further thoughts on that, sort of the keeping that in mind with those opportunities?
I think that's it. I think as the educator, as the parent, as the person who wants to support a successful social interaction, and that means there's enjoyment, there's joy, right? Doesn't mean we're meltdown free. It means that there's more joy in that. And if we want that to happen, we really do need to be very thoughtful. I am so thoughtful of my 3 hours with my 9 students with autism at the university, of what could happen, what might happen, how can I prepare them? I want them to be able to bring their best self to the page. And if they have a recognition of the sensory input coming into their brains around them, and they have more structure, that decreases their anxiety, and they're able to call up skills that are amazing.
Amazing. Brilliant. And obviously you've mentioned your book, and people can access that and access you via email. And I think maybe we'll just finish with one final question. Do you have another publication in mind or in progress? I'm sure you get asked.
I think that Marcy and I were just talking about how language has changed, how thoughts have changed, and how when we look at our book, we would change this differently, and we would change these few things differently, and that maybe more short articles, more short briefs might be in the future. I also am a new grandma, so I'm just watching that interaction happen.
Fabulous. Marcy, any final thoughts from you?
Just so funny, Laura, that we were just speaking about this before you came on. And, you know, as we were looking to prepare for this presentation, looking at other presentations that's similar that we've done, we really sat for hours just recently, not that we haven't even done this recently, making some of these updates and changes. And we know that we will ask in advance for forgiveness for mistakes that we've made or places that we haven't been as enlightened as we hope to become. And same with what Mo just said about the book. So we just so appreciate the opportunity. You can tell we're really excited about it, but at the same time, just to express that humility and to know that we continue to grow and learn, and we'll see what's next.
Fantastic.
Because I
Kathleen?
really do have to say that Marcy and I have learned from families. We are who we are with the knowledge that we have because of all of the people.
Amazing.
So we appreciate that.
That's a lovely, lovely point to end on. Kathleen, Mo Taylor, and Marcy Laurel joining us from Albuquerque. Thank you so much for your time and your very thoughtful messages through your presentation. I'm sure we've can all say that we've gained a lot. It's just lovely hearing other people and getting different perspectives on those skills. And yeah, learning something else that we can bring to the table, trying to make life better for those that we love. It may not be the neurotypical might need just that little bit extra and that little bit more thought. So again, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed that and wish you both the best of luck in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.